So let's say that you're at the point, or have been for a while, where you really want a healthy relationship with food, decided that the willpower and the diets and the controlling food, it's not for you, it's not working out for you, and you've heard of this concept, healthy relationship with food or being a natural intuitive eater, and you're like, okay, that's what I'm aiming for, and you've got the best of intentions, right? It's indisputable how much you want it. If that's where you're at, I wanted to share some things that I really wish that I'd known as I was developing a healthy relationship with food. Some of these things that would have saved me some time and some hardship. It is so much easier to aim towards something when you know specifically where it is that you're trying to get to and how you'll know if you've arrived. So that would be my first tip to you, would be, how would you know that you've arrived at a healthy relationship with food? Get specific on it. How will you be thinking about food? How will you be using food? What will be going on with your cravings? Things like this. When we're in sort of rule-based land and analysis land and anxiety land with food, leaving our goal too abstract is only going to work against us, because that's just very easily going to spark off confusion, which then leads into anxiety, right? On this journey, clarity is king. And maybe you've even heard what my definition of a healthy relationship with food is, being able to eat freely without over or under eating, trusting yourself fully around food, feeling in healthy control with food, being able to enjoy any food that you want to enjoy without a fear of losing control, all of these things. And if you need any help with that, because it can be mystical and abstract, I appreciate, then there are other videos that I've made kind of along these lines on this channel. You're also very welcome to book in for a discovery call with us. The second thing that took me a while to realize about developing a healthy relationship with food is it can feel really safe to do 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So kind of partially giving ourselves permission, so long as it's under certain conditions, or partially allowing ourselves to eat certain things, so long as it's 1 chocolate bar and not 2, right? Be wary of this. I fell into this trap. It seems to make really good sense, and I believe it's an attempt at trying to maintain control when we feel so out of control and so fearful of where the journey can take us. Be mindful of it, because this is very easily just leading into more rules, which can lead us to think that we're developing a healthy relationship with food, when in fact we're not. We've just gone on to a more flexible diet, like the intuitive eating diet, right? Then when that doesn't work out and it still leads to binges or analyzing food or feeling anxious around food, basically our relationship with food is not changing, but we think that we're working on it, then it can easily then lead us to believe, see, I can't develop a healthy relationship with food. And that would be a critical shame, and very easily keep us stuck unnecessarily. And I know it's not as easy as just being like, okay, just give up all of your rules then, don't do that, because there'd be very good reasons why you are trying to put rules and constraints in place if that's what you're doing. I'm not going to go into that in this video because it will get way too long and it's not the point of this video, but if you want to explore that further, like how to actually become an intuitive eater and not turn it into new rules, which is doomed to backfire, then I've made a video on that topic specifically. I'll put it up here for you, and I'll also leave it linked down in the description below. The third thing I want to speak about that can keep us stuck in not developing a healthy relationship with food is actually something which I did realize as I started my journey. And so this isn't something that I wish that I'd known. This is something that I'm grateful that I knew. And that is, developing a healthy relationship with food requires us to accept the body that a healthy relationship with food gives us. And of course, that can be such a difficult thing to accept if part of the reason why you're struggling in food so much is because you're trying to control the body that you have for a variety of very valid and very real reasons. Then the idea of letting that go or accepting that can seem like a very daunting task. For me, I was able to accept it because I'd been struggling in food for so long, and I'd done diet after diet after diet. I'd gone through so many diets that I was now circulating through them for a second or third time. And I remember sitting at the breakfast bar of my house at the time with this massive container of boring salad. I was on a clean eating hype. No, in fact, it wasn't clean eating. I was on the bland food diet, which basically was allowing myself to eat X number of calories, which apparently was appropriate, not underfeeding myself, but I was like, I'm just going to make the food as bland and as boring as possible so that I'm not tempted to overeat on it. It made total logical sense to me at the time. And I remember sitting there with this massive Tupperware of leaves and quinoa and raw pepper and plain chickpeas, no dressing on it. It was as bland as it possibly could have been. And then the cravings hit, and then I had a binge. And I remember this just broke me. I remember thinking, I don't know where to go from here. My weight was climbing, which at the time for me was absolutely devastating, as you can imagine. And so that led me on to the very radical conclusion, and only if you've struggled with your food and body image can you appreciate how radical this is to come to. I was like, fine, if I'm going to be overweight, as it were, as my thoughts at the time, then at least I can not be hungry. Whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm trying so hard and I'm gaining weight anyway, so at the very least, I can not be hungry and enjoy food. And I really had to come to that place of genuine acceptance of my body. And for me, it was kind of like a last resort, yes, but nevertheless, it still worked. Then developing that acceptance of my body, or reaching that point, is what allowed me to develop a healthy relationship with food. Because so long as I was attached to that body, it made every single one of my food choices throughout the day weighted, which meant I had to analyze, which meant that I had to be somewhat restrictive. And all of these things were feeding into my struggles with food. But something that I wish that I had known sooner in my journey is that I didn't need to get to the point where I loved my body in order to develop a healthy relationship with food. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself throughout my journey to get to the point where I absolutely loved my body. And all it required was for me to accept it, because having the goal of body acceptance rather than loving my body is what led on to me being like, okay, in order to accept my body, what are the things that I'm currently blaming my body for? What am I saying that I can't be or do or have because of my body? I'm going to prove to myself that I can have those things and be those things regardless of my body. And so having that goal of body acceptance led me down a very different path to the one that body love would have taken me down. And it was the path that I took there that ultimately helped me to develop a healthy relationship with food, because then I was doing more, I was living more, I was growing confidence in that process, taking care of myself, and all of these things massively impacted my emotional eating urges and my trust in myself and my relationship with food in general. A little bit abstract, I appreciate, but hopefully that makes enough sense. Another thing that I wish that I'd known about developing a healthy relationship with food that we also have to run through with clients sometimes is it's okay to want to nourish our body, and nourishing our body doesn't mean that we're being restrictive. We're being restrictive if we are forcing ourselves into nourishing our body. It is okay to want to nourish our body and for that to be coming from a place of self-care. I've seen quite a lot of clients raise this concern during their journey with us of, is it restrictive if I am aiming to eat nourishing food? I associate that with being restrictive. Is that okay? And the answer is, well, yeah, of course, if it's coming from a place of self-care. And because when we're struggling with food, our minds can be sneaky. We don't fully trust ourselves. We might wonder, well, how do I know? Maybe I'm tricking myself by thinking this is an act of self-care rather than being restrictive. And to that, I'd say it's okay to be on this journey of learning. If it feels like it's an act of self-care, then lean into that. And if it turns out in hindsight it wasn't, and you were unintentionally lying to yourself, that will come out. And then you can address it when it comes out. It's not something to do perfectly. There is time, and you are allowed to be learning on this journey. The next thing that I wish that I'd known when I was developing a healthy relationship with food is that this journey is not meant to be linear. I mean, that's such a cliche thing to say, but I mean it. And if we can understand this, then it can really help us to be resilient along that journey and interact with seeming setbacks in a completely different way that doesn't derail us. There were stages as I was developing a healthy relationship with you where I felt more at peace, where I felt more free, where I felt like, I've really got this. And then some new circumstance would come in and it would seemingly disrupt all of that. And the first time that I went through this, it took me right back to square one because I interpreted the situation as a setback or a lapse. And I think this is one of the places where some professionals really fall down in this field, is almost encouraging people who struggle with food to view these instances as lapses. In my very strong opinion, these instances where binge eating may return, or we feel out of control with food all of a sudden, they are not lapses. It's just you had some peace and some freedom, and that was real, and that was happening for good reason. And then a new circumstance came into the situation which you hadn't yet experienced or learnt from. It's highlighting some area that hasn't yet been healed, as it were. And all that's necessary at that point is to learn from it, understand it, and take another step forward. And it's part of the journey. It's just that different circumstances will highlight new areas that need to be worked on. It is not going back to square one unless that's what we interpret it as. If we interpret it as a lapse, we're going back to square one, then we're not open-minded about being curious and learning from the situation in order to take a step forward. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. At the first experience that I had with this, I viewed it as a lapse and therefore went right back to square one. But I didn't give up, started again, and then I started interacting with these circumstances as the learning opportunities that they were. I learned how to learn from them, if you know what I mean. And we spend an awful lot of time with clients on this. How do you learn from these situations to be able to take another step forward? We call it wisdom building. But it's very common when we struggle with food to be black and white thinkers, perfectionists, outcome-based, attached to outcomes, attached to results. And so it's very common to view these situations as, see, it's all messed up. I didn't actually have a healthy relationship with food. I'm not capable of having one. But if you've had periods where you felt more free, you felt more peaceful, those were real, they did actually happen, you weren't deluding yourself, they were real and they were happening, and there were things that you were doing or thinking that allowed for that state of peace and freedom. And those things are still valid, they're still important, and it's critical that we continue to take them forward in our journey and not disregard them, if you see what I mean. It's just that you might have had some of the puzzle pieces there, and then a situation comes along, it highlights to you there's another area to address, and you just got to add in those other puzzle pieces. You don't disregard the ones you already have, you just add in the next ones. And then another situation will arise and you add in some more. And that's kind of the way that it works. So be prepared for that. And hopefully it will give you a lot more resilience and peace of mind along the journey when you understand the nature of it. All of these big journeys, and developing a healthy relationship with food, it is a big journey. It requires a shift in our way of being, right? It's not a small thing. All of these journeys have periods of peace, where things are seemingly okay, and then periods of disruption that we need to learn from, and then a bit more periods of peace. And then ultimately, in time, those periods of disruption become less and less frequent if we're continuing to learn. Because if we're not triggered, then we don't know what things to address, and we're therefore not actually progressing. And the last thing I want to touch on in this video, and I'm happy to make more videos like this, by the way, if they're helpful, just let me know in the comments if you'd like that. The last thing I want to mention is it would have been really helpful for me when I was developing a healthy relationship with food if I had realized, yes, I need to build trust in my body needs to build trust in me, I need to build trust in myself. Yes, that's part of having a healthy relationship with food. You can't have a healthy relationship with food if you don't trust yourself, or you don't trust your body, or it doesn't trust you. It would just be anarchy. So yes, that's an important part of the process, is building that trust. But the realization that would have been helpful to make sooner is that trust is earned. Doesn't matter which way you slice it in life, at least in my experience. Right back at the start of my journey, I understandably did not have an awful lot of trust in myself. I didn't have an awful lot of trust in my body. It seemed like my body wanted to gain weight at any given opportunity, if I even so much as looked at a cookie. I didn't trust myself around food. In my experience, I was always out of control with food. I had very logical reasons to not trust myself. It was a flawed conclusion to come to, but logical reasons nonetheless. So I needed to build that. And so because I didn't trust myself, my solution to that, as I started developing a healthy relationship with food, was to kind of monitor myself and still keep, close eye on myself and analyze things, because I was scared, right? I was scared of what would happen if I took my eye off the ball. And that makes complete sense. But that's not the way to build trust, is what I came to realize. Like, if I didn't trust my other half, thankfully I do, but let's say that I didn't, and I was constantly checking his phone because I don't trust him. That checking of his phone is not going to build my trust in him. The only way for me to trust him, again, completely hypothetical situation by the way, but it's the best one I could think of. The only way to rebuild my trust in him was if that trust was earned. And so when we're building trust up with ourselves and our body and vice versa, it means that that trust needs to be earned, which means that we need to allow the space for that trust to be earned. So one example from my journey is my body needed to learn to trust me, yes, because I'd been restricting and binging so long, it didn't know whether it was coming or going, is it feast or famine, and it was just freaked out, and consequently my appetite was much, much higher than it is today, because I was constantly putting my body through periods of famine. Separate discussion, but hopefully that makes sense. And so in order to bring my appetite down to normal, as it were, where it is today, my body needed to trust that if it was hungry, it was going to get fed. Now, of course, I didn't trust my body at this point, because my experience was I gained some weight if I even look at a cookie. But ultimately, me and my body needed to get out of this drama cycle, and something needed to change. So I needed to allow the space and the ability for my body to develop trust with me again, and for me to trust my body. I needed to allow myself to honor my appetite cues in order to see if my appetite did start to stabilize, and there was no way around that. Building trust back up with myself meant allowing myself the space to kind of act freely and not judge myself, not keep an eye on myself, but give myself the space to do that, see what I do, and then be curious and learn from those situations. But if I never allowed myself that freedom or that openness to experiment and to learn, I never would have built trust up with myself. And so it can be very tempting when we don't trust ourselves or our body to, out of fear, micromanage, oversee, kind of helicopter mum the situation. But if we're committed to building that trust back up, we have to kind of release the reins a little bit and just watch and observe and notice non-judgmentally. And the other thing that I'll say about trust building is, I see people make this mistake all the time, and I made this, is if we say, I trust myself if I do everything right and according to plan, that's what allows me to trust myself. That is doomed to fail. That is also not how we build trust with ourselves. And I say that because it could be very tempting to be like, okay, I'm going to release the reins on myself a little bit and then notice that I didn't do what I wanted myself to do. And then it's like, you see, I can't trust myself. And that would be a massive error. When it comes to developing trust in ourselves, again, that's far more about releasing the reins, experimenting, and then learning from situations. It's not about always getting things right or perfectly or following our plans. It's about trusting our future selves to learn from situations as and when needed. That's what builds wisdom. That's what allows for positive change over time and allows for that trust to build. I don't trust myself today because I do everything right or perfectly. That would be ludicrous. I trust myself because I know myself well, because I've built that wisdom. So I know for the vast majority of times I do right by myself. And I also trust future me that if something doesn't go according to plan or I do something unhelpful towards myself, then I trust future me to learn from it curiously, without judgment. If you're looking for a structured approach to develop a healthy relationship with food, step by step, and build up trust with yourself, all of it, if you don't want to do it on your own, or if you just want to save time on your journey and you want a process and guidance, then we offer a program that does this, where we teach all of our clients the skills of a healthy relationship with food in a very step-by-step format. If you're interested in exploring if that could be right for you, then you're very welcome to book in for an initial discovery call, and we'll chat things through with you and see if you might be in the right place, and then we'll take it from there. And if you're not at that point, or if you're doing this on your own, then we've got lots of other videos on this channel that could be helpful for you on your journey, I've been told. And I'll leave a few of them linked down below for you that could be particularly resonant. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.